Hi guys, I'm still setting this up here. I accidentally go live. Oh, there we are. It's like it's my first day doing this. Anyway, just still setting this up and my hand hit the go live. So just so you know, we got our right there. And hey, just gonna take a moment. I know that usually when we go live, it's after school, that sort of thing, but I can't not do this right now. Rebecca Lewis Pankratz works inside our office.
Hello, friends. New friends.
and she has a very interesting story. First of all, if you don't know Rebecca, I've tagged her on this. You should totally go look her up, friend her, because she's not originally an educator, although maybe she was her kid's first educator, you know, as parents are. But she's teaching us all a whole lot about things we don't know. And so I came into the office, and Rebecca turned and watched me come in because she gets here early because she drinks a lot of coffee. And anyway, so she started telling me these things, and I said, I don't know what, I mean, I know what she was saying, but I thought this has to be captured. I'm not exactly sure why you started talking to me about this today, but let's go ahead. I'm gonna let you talk for a little bit. What do you do, and why do you keep knocking on my door regarding PBL?
So I work to get families and kids completely out of economic poverty. And my journey brought me to schools a couple of years ago and really starting to go in and do deeper dives with what does that look like, you know, and more importantly, what are some of the things that we're not doing that could be really powerful in a student's life and in our interactions with parents. And so I accidentally went to a PBL classroom in McPherson, Kansas. I got invited to come speak there by a student, and there was stuff flying everywhere and kids running around and all kinds of cardboard and energy, and I'm like, what is this place? And got to talk to Paul Carver, and he told me about Ginger. I'm like, I know who Ginger is. And I became very curious about project-based learning because I'm very interested in the way that toxic stress and trauma and the lack of resilience in our kids' lives wires their brain differently than a kiddo that's had natural growth and development. So what I mean by that is that the presence of cortisol and not having enough supportive, caring people around you to get that hormone shut down if there's some really adverse childhood experiences happening, really overwires our students' brains on the left and the right side for fight, flight, freeze. And while that's happening, that underwires the prefrontal cortex, which is where our kids make decisions and plan, and then there's a whole host of other issues that go into it. But project-based learning, I know, besides building confidence and giving kids purpose and passion and elevating them with their peers as, hey, look, I'm a doer, I can succeed, it also fixes the prefrontal cortex. The plasticity in our brain, we have access to continue to build that prefrontal cortex well into adulthood, and figuring out how to help teachers understand that PBL is the solution. It is an active part of solving some of these behavior issues, getting kids to self-regulate, passion, purpose, worldview.
That's a big thing. Now, when she says this, I say, okay, right, how does she know all this? I mean, what do you know? Because in the world of education, we have a lot of folks who are talking about kids in poverty and a life of poverty, and they have no clue what they're talking about. How many of us didn't grow up like that, right? So, Rebecca, what gives you the right to talk about poor folks like you know?
So, I was born to a single mom. Tough stuff growing up. If you look at adverse childhood experiences, the potential score, maximum score is 10. I have 8 ACEs. And so growing up was just different than a lot of kids that were around me. I was in a more affluent community. Dropped out of high school when I was 16. Fell into, found myself in worse conditions in my life than what I had even been raised in. Started having kids in the trailer park, survival mode, fighting every day, trying to get out. Bumped up against a nonprofit in 2011 that gets people out of poverty permanently. I had been in college for almost a decade trying to get a 4-year degree. Like I was, I'd heard in our society that a 4-year degree was somehow going to fix everything going on in our lives, that was going to get me and my kids out of poverty. So I fought forever trying to get that 4-year degree for almost a decade, bumped up against this nonprofit, realized I was missing a ton of information, and more importantly, the social capital and the resilience that comes from having more supportive, caring people in me and my kids' life, and everything changed. And so I ended up going to work for that nonprofit, building that nonprofit into the largest and most successful circle site in the country. And a couple of years ago, and teachers became very interested in me and my community. People became interested in my story and watching my journey of transformation. But more importantly, teachers became interested in me. They wanted to pick my brain, like, Rebecca, we don't understand what we're seeing. You know, it sends us into orbit, these things. What is this? And more importantly, what are we doing wrong? And how can we do something different to make an impact in these students' lives? And Dr. Steve Wyckoff was in a classroom that I was being brought into in a master's program for educators. And he saw me and he said, Rebecca, come to SDOC and talk to my people. And so I did. And they said, you know, if we started to send you into school districts, what would that look like for you? And I knew that I got very excited at the potential of being able to go in and talk from personal history, from experience of getting many families completely out of poverty into middle class lives, generationally poor families into middle class, the long, hard work that is, how to translate middle class expectations and language and currency with generational poverty, language, expectations, and currency. How do we put all that together to be effective? And more importantly, you know, what can I bring to education that generationally middle class people just don't come to the table knowing?
I love that. So I'm really count myself fortunate to be able to work just a couple of desks away from you.
Teacher's my hero.
And vice versa. You know, it's nice little hero worship club right here, because the things that she says, I think this is the sort of thing that I try to share with teachers, and the way she puts it is undeniable. And so when she says, Ginger, PBL is this, and I'm like, well, I know this, but what do you mean? And so she and I are actually working together quite a bit to bring the thought of trauma-informed classrooms, the strategies that really work, and how PBL is more than just soft skills for kids, that it really is, it's deeper than that. And this is something that we both believe in. I think passionate might be an understatement.
Might be an understatement.
Yeah.
You know, how do we take those kids in the classroom where the behaviors are taking over the classroom? As an educator, I mean, I hear people tell me, as an educator, Rebecca, I'm overwhelmed. You know, I don't know how to effectively manage this, and more importantly, I don't know how to help those kids, while also creating an excellent learning environment for the other students in the room. I mean, you've got two types of learners and a spectrum in between of what's going on. And poverty in our nation has always kind of grown percentage-wise. It's always been static with population. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case going forward. Poverty is growing. And I believe, looking at some of the things that I pay attention to, that we might hit a tipping point at some, and I think that I would wonder if all of you out there are saying, hey, looks different than it did 5 years ago, certainly looks different than it did 10 years ago, looks different than it did last year. More and more kids are showing up to our building with all kinds of issues that really aren't relating to content and to grow, to learning, and how do we bridge that?
Yeah, and people tell me a lot that, well, I can't do PBL because those kids won't fill in the blank with whatever. When it's funny, not funny at all, but funny as in, that's exactly who we want to target. Well, a huge piece of it, not the only. I think it's good for, I'm going to just say it out loud, it's good for all kids. I know that's a stereotype to say, well, this is good for all kids. But it is, you know, those of you who've seen me talk before, you know about Abby, right? She's the perfect student. Things are great, right? And it's good for her. It's good for kids like me, who is a slide by, fake my way through. It's maybe good for kids like her who's doesn't have the support at home, who doesn't have a stable life, and has no idea how to get one, because all her people she sees as role models can't role model it for her. It's just that learning by doing.
You know, we've been pulling out some learning center students, high school completion students, kids that traditional brick and mortar school they got churned out of that for various reasons, and they end up in our learning centers. And so we've been really curious about working with those students and pulling them out and treating them like the brightest students in the universe, and saying, hey, what would you do? What does this look like? You know, what are you passionate about? And so, you know, some of the things that PBL also aligns with the trauma sensitive. I don't know, maybe everyone out there hasn't heard about trauma sensitive movements, but
Yeah, where would we go? What organizations would we look for?
well, I know that
I mean, besides having you come out.
right, KSTE, the TASN website. If you just go in there, you do have to get a login, but you all would qualify for that. And then,
Dude, I got people who are not in Kansas watching this.
Oh.
Remember?
okay, well, you guys, so the trauma sensitive movement comes from the adverse childhood experience work that has been in public health for over a decade now. Public health has been pulling this apart. People are very interested in it because with those adverse childhood experiences, you can really predict health outcomes. Mental health kind of got to the party a few years ago, and now public education is showing up. And I've been intrigued with the adverse childhood experience study with the families I worked with, my own life, my own family, and really going, oh my gosh, here it is. I mean, all my life I've pondered certain things, and I've watched certain families that I've worked with, and that is the holy grail of understanding, and there is more and more research that's being put out there every day. Paper Tigers, Jim Sporleder on Twitter is going to be an excellent resource. Paper Tigers, that movie.
And SPORLEDER.
Yes.
Jim Sporleder.
And just trauma sensitive work in education, there is a ton of research, and there are people, and the fun thing is that nobody owns this work. It's just being given to society. And it's an excellent way to pull public health, mental health, and education all into the same basket and really start to be collective about our impact. And so, you know, what I love about it, though, because with project-based learning, really going to those students and saying, hey, we see something in you, and what would you do? And the thing to remember about poverty that I don't know if it always shows up on the radar in generationally middle class or in public school is that parents and kids in poverty are problem solvers. They are actively solving concrete problems every single day. In poverty, it's always about right now and what problem do you have to solve next. Well, that doesn't necessarily, we don't necessarily see that in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And so to remember that your students that are in survival mode, that's a strength for them. You know, they're used to bumping up against things as a family and having to come back and reboot and go hit it again and just get through the day, right? So with PBL, I mean, from what I know, and I'm not an expert, that there's a lot of problem solving in PBL.
The kids I saw come alive are the ones who were not engaged by regular classroom stuff. The stuff where they say they don't even bother to ask, where does this affect me in the real world, because they just really don't care. Especially when we're by the way up by middle school and high school by now. And when we were working with project-based learning, I'm going to give a shout out to one of my boys, Austin, who was just amazing in the classroom because his daily life was that problem-solving piece, that and people, my other students would say, oh, you know, at first they didn't want Austin in the group because they thought, well, he's not very smart and he doesn't speak with great grammar and he kind of smells sometimes. I'm just saying that out loud, Austin. He's older now. I think we can speak truth, and he's a very different person now. And he said, sorry, that's what happens when somebody in the office doesn't know we're over here. I just get a phone call sent to me. Anyway.
So yeah, I definitely think that if we want to help kids get the confidence, build trust, empower them, you know, to have a growth mindset, we're going to build on their strengths. This teaches skills of regulation, problem solving, social and emotional learning. You know, we can flip kids with project-based learning and trauma-sensitive classrooms. I think at ESDAC we know that we are in a very we have a great opportunity as an organization. In Kansas, they're doing some new indicators of success for students, and it's kind of got education in Kansas in orbit. They're like, these are not the normal things that we've been tracking. And social emotional learning and really what happens to kids after high school is becoming very important in our state. And a lot of the people that I listen to that have been in education for a long time, they're like, finally, this is the right thing to do. Right. But what it really comes down to is changing the outcomes for those kids. How do we do that? you know, and, you know, so I think that as we're really interested in project-based learning, leadership, poverty, trauma-sensitive work, and pulling all of that together, and literacy. I mean, we can have amazing kids, but we've got to make sure they can read. But pulling all of those things together to really alter this tipping point that's coming in poverty, to really turn the ship. And then one of my favorite things, because I was a mom in the trailer park that got clean and sober and then bumped up against a nonprofit that got me out of poverty. I know what it's like to have kids in a building, and I know what that feels like as a mother, and to just be broken, love your kids, can't find your way out. And so I love to also bring that aspect when I work with education too, is how do we release our judgment of those parents, embrace curiosity, bring them towards us so that we can partner, regardless of where the parents are, for the kids' success. So
we both could talk about these sorts of things all day long, and do. And it's exciting to mix flavors here and understand what some of the struggles are that we have in the classroom are not untouchable. We can get right into the heart of them, and the kids that bring those issues to bear. So if I'm going to put some links that I'm going to get from her into the comments here. Some of them I already know, but I know she's going to have some other things. I'm also excited. This is what she's doing with our I hate saying dropout recovery, because we don't call them dropouts.
They're like the brightest kids on the planet, and so I guess we say drop in. But yeah, high school completion, and we've got people that are 16 years old all the way up to probably 116 working on this in Kansas, and so.
Right, and so she's working on that just to be more than just sitting at a computer for credit recovery. This is about really impacting entire communities. So if this is something that's a need in your community, and you know that it is, follow some of these links and see what's going on, or invite Rebecca out to talk with your leadership, your teachers, your community, your kids, or let's truly get some project, problem, passion-based learning going, and touch the kids today, not in a creepy way.
Well,
touch. I need to stop saying that. I don't.
It's a winnable game, guys, with the trauma-sensitive movement and all of these pieces that have already been brilliant in education, pulling this all together so that we can get through the behaviors to the talent that all of these students bring with us, and help put the right equipment on teachers so that you know the things to do to circumvent behaviors, but also to prevent them and build this part of the brain for wins.
Thanks for listening. I know this was long, as I said, but hopefully meaty for you. Good luck.
Happy Friday.
Yay.